Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your coffee break. So you will have seen from the agenda that this session is, it's been described as a fireside chat. So this is supposed to be a cozy conversation, I think, between the three of us here on the panel. But what we are going to do, because there were so many questions, I think, unanswered in the first session, and because I know you're such an engaged audience, we are going to try and allow some time at the end of this session to come back to you for questions as well. So in terms of the topic that we're focusing on for the next half an hour, this is all about data for procurement and how we can make government a smart customer. So around 1/3 of the money that government spends is on procured goods and services, but it's a real challenge, I think, for government to get the data that it needs to be able to evaluate how well those contracts are performing. So we're going to dig into all the issues that come out of that now with our two great speakers. So we have here with us Matthew Rees, who is the Commercial Hub Director for the National Audit Office, and Sarah Ashley, who's a partner at Beringa and heads up the government and public sector work there at Beringa. So I'm going to kick off really just to set the scene for all of you by kind of asking Matthew to tell us a little bit about the role of the NAO when it comes to the public service data landscape.
Yes, no, great, thanks, great to be here. Yeah, no, so our role, for those of you who've looked at what the NAO is, we're independent of government. So our role is to be holding government to account. We audit a lot of government data. So for us, the quality of the data that we get is vital. The value that we add to that is to bring transparency and assurity and confidence to the data as well. And obviously a lot of that is through our financial audit work, but the work that I do and with my colleagues on the value for money side is also about the performance of government, the efficiency and effectiveness of it. And that, that whole procurement spend that Siobhan just mentioned is a huge amount of our attention. My work looks across departments. We've got work going on in every department. A big report yesterday actually on defence inventory. A lot of issues there on supply chain.
Great, thank you. So you cover kind of a broad area
Absolutely.
of things. And Sarah, similarly, just to kind of set the scene for the audience, can you tell us a little bit maybe about Beringa and how you work across the public sector?
Yeah, sure. And as Matthew said, really great to be here today. So I'm a partner in Beringa. Beringa is a 2,000-person UK headquartered management consultancy. Sometimes people boo then, but thank you for not booing then. We work across 4 industry sectors, one of which is government and the public sector, which I work in all of the time. With our government sector clients, we work on policy development sometimes. So at the moment, we're working with the CAA on drone license plates, for want of a better word, and lots of data implications then through design and delivery, where we're often helping public sector clients buy technology programs or services. And then we go in through and help with operational improvements. So we help Land Registry improve their productivity by 20%, which obviously has a big data element as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so the first kind of question I want to put to you, Matthew, Simon Case at the very beginning mentioned one of the benefits of getting using data more effectively than we do is to drive up efficiencies. Yeah. And obviously that's a big focus of the NAO. So can you give us kind of some examples of how much, what's the scale of benefits? How much money do you think government could be saving if the quality of the data and the way it's managed is improved?
Yeah, no, and if I can, I'm just going to pull up one of the slides here. So this is just gives the context of what I'm going to talk about. So our reports look right through the commercial life cycle. And the last report we've just looked at is on competition. And talking about the amount that's spent, even just thinking simply about adding extra bidders into competitive processes, estimates of 3 to 5% worth of whole spending could be improved through this. But the problem is that the data quality isn't there to know how many bidders there are, how effectively procurements have been running. So in the work that we've just done and we've looked through this, we're finding that the quality of data for procurement is missing, fundamentally missing quality. About 6% of the procurements that we looked at recently just failed to include all of the relevant data parameters. So these broad estimates, 3%, 6%, something like that, simply through the lens of improved competition. Now, clearly, better data quality will enable that. Other areas that we've looked at, as I mentioned, just on defence, defence inventory management, there are just literally dozens of legacy systems. So, you know, there's a team responsible for logistics efficiency. About £400 million worth of savings over a 10-year period are intended to come out of better inventory management. If the data isn't there, you simply can't achieve those savings. Third, final example, DEFRA, you know, now increasingly a proportion of its spend is going on legacy systems. You know, there's just a whole range of programs here where the data quality isn't delivering value. So, yeah, I think it's hard to get to a point number, but yeah. I think it's a significant proportion of spend.
Thanks, Matthew. So, Sarah, in your working with kind of different organisations across the public sector, does what Matthew says ring true? Do you find that the quality of data is not good enough and that's leading to inefficiencies?
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think you said a really interesting point, Matthew. Like, we're trying to drive competition in the marketplace. We know that delivers value for money for the taxpayer, and you talked about some of the percentages lost. What we find is if you're a supplier, and we're a supplier to government, government requests the same data from us all of the time. Beringa alone, and we provide a very small slice of services to government, are on 71 procurement portals. And every week we're asked, can we have another copy of your carbon reduction plan? Can we have this? Can we have that? And that's a barrier to entry into the market. And we are able to manage that. But there are many smaller suppliers who would be great suppliers into government, who would increase competition, drive better delivery of innovative services, who are just being asked for the same data over and over again. So there's quite a lot of efficiencies pre-deal. And then we see lots of opportunity for inefficiencies kind of post-deal. When the contract is signed, we think there's about 9% of the value is leaked then after that. And that means that data that the procurement teams have worked on with the suppliers are not handed over to the business owners. So they are running services where they don't fully understand what the suppliers are going to provide in data all the way through. And that has a massive impact in the delivery of services. So one of our clients had signed a big outsourcing deal and came to us and said, we want some process improvement change around actually a commercial process. And we said, well, why isn't your supplier providing this for you? Well, they can't do it. We've never asked them to do it. And when you look in the contract, well, actually, the supplier is contractually obliged to provide some of that change management. And that's a kind of back office story of it. And then there's stories which were in the front line. I've spent some time with somebody in an NHS trust, and the contract which had been signed at a national level meant that all trusts were supposed to hold 3 days worth of stock, and we'll use bandages as the example here, 3 days worth of stock. The people in the NHS trust did not know they were supposed to hold 3 days worth of stock, then that was signed at a national level. So on a Friday when the delivery didn't come, that was fine. The supplier wasn't in breach of their contract. They knew that the hospitals thought hospitals had been told to hold 3 days worth of stock. The hospital didn't know that. Their team have to then go out and buy bandages and plaster and stuff to keep their trauma centres open. So that kind of lack of thread of data has real world impacts, which I think are really important for us to, you know, we need to think about inefficiencies, but we also need to think about service delivery being impacted.
Do you think some of this, we've been talking about kind of getting communities to talk to each other, different communities in the civil service and the public sector. Do you think maybe it's because procurement professionals haven't traditionally been talking to data and digital experts? Is there kind of a lack of joining up there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing we have seen which is very positive is the development of the government functions. So that's great, but the siloing of functions is an issue. I mean, my background as an accountant, I get into the commercial world. Does the general ledger and the accounts process involve the procurement and commercial folks? I don't think it does all the time. I mean, when we were talking just before this session about whether government starts from a top-down approach with its commercial officers, how far into the organisations and to the further reaches of the public sector does it go, so that everybody that's involved in the procurement throughout this life cycle that we're talking about has the skills and capabilities? Do they know what their overall objective is, and how do they have an influence over efficiency? I think there's a lot more that needs to happen with collaboration. I mean, we've seen some quite good networks now. I mean, Cabinet Office has what they call K-Hub, so there are social media networks which are encouraging debate and discussion, and that's really good to see that engagement coming up. But I think there's a lot more that could be done.
Thanks. I want to ask about international comparisons. I want to put that to you, and then I'm going to ask about comparisons within the UK to you, Sarah. So, Matthew, how do you think we compare nationally to other countries when it comes to kind of data quality, transparency, using data to improve procurement processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two answers to that. I think one is I think we are perceived internationally as a good, high-quality, open government. And when we talk with the OECD, World Bank, and others, that reputation still exists. However, when you start to look at now some of the dashboards that the European Union and the OECD are encouraging, I think countries that have come late to this have leapt further. The opportunity to escape the legacy data sort of challenge is one that I think UK government really struggles with. We are where we are. But I think when you look across some of the, Estonia, sometimes you hear about South America, you really do see now countries which have grasped the nettle of open contracting data. They've got, modern systems. I was looking at some data recently from Hungary, really reporting 100% across a whole range of common dashboards. So I think there's a lot more that we can do to re-earn that reputation that I think we've justifiably had for a number of years, but I think we've not necessarily kept going. And I think it's obvious from some of our work in the early stages of the pandemic that that really threw the government supply chain into disarray. And I think a lot of our work now is about trying to turn the page on that and move forward. A business as usual. How do we get back to a modern, aspirational kind of agenda on the data quality side?
It's interesting, Estonia has come up now several times, I think. They're a real world leader, I think, in a lot of this. So maybe on your one big thing, you should try and do a day trip to Estonia.
Away day to Estonia.
Yeah, away day to Estonia. Sarah, more domestically focused, are there pockets of good practice across the UK public sector landscape, and similarly, are there areas that you think are particularly bad when it comes to kind of using data effectively?
Yeah, and I think overall there's been loads of progress. The government commercial function has really raised standards across commercial, and that is great. And of course we see brilliant pockets of good practice. If I think about the NHS, which is enormous, and they are rolling out a single procurement system called Atomis so that they have all of their pipeline data around what they're going to spend in one place. That's enormously powerful. It enables them to see how they're buying energy at different prices and then kind of aggregate some of that spend. So that's really good. But we should be under no illusion. Government departments are under loads of pressure. Some of them have got, kind of punchy policy mandates to deliver really, really quickly, and therefore some buying is really sped up. I don't think that's ever a bad thing. I think we can always shorten some procurement timelines, but that kind of handover into good contract management gets left behind when you're having to buy things really quickly. As we see as citizens around the barge, some of those things are bought really, really quickly, and then how do we make sure all of that data is handed on into teams as we do more things in that space?
Do you think there is just also an issue of people are trying to do so much that it gets overlooked, that kind of handing on and sharing?
Yeah, I think Matthew said it's parts of government still work in loads of silos. People work in silos in departments, and of course bits of government don't work together. I think when government works all together, it's amazing. So the response to Carillion was really good. You get a whole government response, and instead of going, okay, we've sorted out our contract and the Carillion's gone, we look at it across the piece, and that's really powerful. And the more we can do that, the better it is for government, for us as taxpayers, and also for suppliers. So I spoke to a facilities company who was like, this is crazy, I have different KPIs. We're in the same department. It's really difficult for me to manage, and that cost gets passed back to us as taxpayers. It's not free resource.
Matthew, so the NAO, you don't obviously you have to point out where things aren't working that well, but you also do recommendations on kind of how things can be improved. So before we go to the audience, I think my final question to both of you is, what would kind of some of your basic advice be on how departments, organisations, people working on these issues could address some of these concerns and actually overcome some of the barriers?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We've got a privileged position because we can recommend, and a lot of our reports get debated in Parliament as well. So there's a procurement bill. It's just reaching its final stages through Parliament. There's a clear opportunity now to really revamp the contracts finder databases. look at modern open contracting data. You know, UK signed up to that early. But you know, the quality issue needs to be taken seriously. This investment pays off because you know you get more confidence about the decisions that you've made, and then you learn from that so that you can improve in the future. So this is not revolutionary investment. It's not even cutting edge stuff. This is just actually getting the basic transparency and reporting systems to be available, timely, complete on common data standards. You know, really that, you know, do the basic do the basic knitting first. The gains from that, I mean, it's that classic 80-20 benefit. Yeah. You can get those 80% benefits from that 20% investment. There's lots more you can do beyond that, but I think getting that basic right is a really urgent priority.
And that definitely came out in the sessions before break, is it's crucial to get those foundations in place, get the basics sorted. Sarah, any tips from you before we go to questions?
Yeah, I think my theme on getting those basics right is you're all buyers, whether you work in commercial or not. You said at the beginning, you know, a third of government spending is through goods and services. So if you are in recipient of a contract or you're going to be a business owner of a contract, well, make sure during the procurement that the KPIs that you want are in the contract as opposed to the ones that the commercial team have thought out. Have a look across departments and with your colleagues. You're a network of people to find really great KPIs that you want in there. Be curious around the commercial life cycle. When your contract is coming to an end, and don't just work with the commercial team really late on, like re-let the same thing. Well, what worked really well in this contract? What do we want to see in the next contract? What other different services do we need? And keep providing that feedback on how the contracts are performing so that we all get better services going forward.
Thanks. We're going to be talking about some of that in the next session as well, kind of evaluating the spend itself. Okay, we've got about just under 10 minutes left for questions. Who would like to put the first question to Matthew or Sarah? There's a stunned silence there on procurement. Yes, we've got a gentleman there with his hand up.
Hey folks, really good to hear some of the thoughts. Can you talk to us a bit about how principles like longer term contracting, alliance contracting that come from the construction playbook help the overall life cycle and help government be a smarter client?
So I didn't hear the first bit of the question. Could you just repeat that?
Principles like alliance contracting, longer term contracting and their benefit for government, essentially.
Okay. Matthew, do you want to kick off?
I mean, I think that there's been a lot of work which we've done on PFI contracts, for example, and I think one of the key learnings from that is to look at the asset quality and the delivery and how demand shifts. So we've put out quite a lot of guidance about how companies that enter these contracts and how government departments need to plan for the full life cycle cost. Lots of this material is on our website. And the Infrastructure and Projects Authorities then responded to that with planning. And I think our work looks across all of these different contractual models. I think that the same principles of effective delivery and effective contract management apply throughout.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think there's been a tendency in the past to try and specify everything down to the nth degree, and as we've all seen over the past 3 years, we could have never have predicted what have happened, and therefore a movement to more outcomes, which does happen, but also letting contracts which has got some flexibility into it. And that doesn't mean you're going to spend all of that money. That doesn't mean you're writing a blank check to the suppliers. It means you're giving yourself space and time as things change, because things will change. And I think we just have to embrace that we're living in kind of constant change. So don't try and create contracts which don't allow you to have any flexibility.
Thanks. Next question. Do we have another question? I mean, there is a lady there. And then, thanks.
Hi, this is working. Rachel Armstrong, I'm from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. This might be a slightly unfair question, but when we're looking at government procurement, it is quite sizable in scale, and we've been doing some work looking at how you drive sustainability metrics through contracting as well. Do you have any data or insights into how effective that is in terms of driving policy outcomes on sustainability and actually building those supply chains up?
Thanks. A really good question. And I think not just sustainability, that's a big thing, but people are putting in lots of different things into contracts now to try and drive up policy objectives. Do we have the data that's evaluating whether that's working or not?
So I go first. I think it's a really, really good question. I think it's really, really challenging. I mean, the carbon reduction plans and some of the questions which are going into supplier selection are obviously starting to put the onus on suppliers to have those outcomes. The broader social value objectives of both Procurement Act and other aspects of procurement are really going to drive that. But I think you've highlighted a key forward-looking theme for every procuring authority, and indeed every private sector buyer. It's now no longer just the cost in financial terms, but the practical limits and benefits to society of climate change and sustainability. So yeah, absolutely key area. Does the data exist? I don't think it's there. I think even financial reporting is, it's slowly starting to creep from private sector into public sector. But for us, it's a key area. We're putting more effort into that, and I'm sure our work will start to evolve. Obviously, a lot of our work is hindsight review, so there's a lot that we need to learn about what government's plans are as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. And what's frustrating around some of those social value things is there's lots of data around social value. There's no insight at the moment, and it's unclear whether that insight should sit in departments or does it sit in Cabinet Office. So we have social value requirements in all of our contracts, and we are B Corp. We are desperate to do those activities. And I could tell you how many activities we've done in Baringa to support social value activities in the public sector and more broadly with our clients. When I talk to government colleagues to say, what are other suppliers doing? What's really, really effective? Because we'd like to have some of those ideas. And so we have no mechanism to pull that together. We don't know whether you planting trees or running a kind of interview prep session is more impactful. And I think that's an enormous missed opportunity.
It's really interesting because in the morning we were talking about how we need to think differently about every issue being a data issue. And it seems like when it comes to procurement, there's still a long way to go in getting that right from the start of the procurement process. Do we have there's a lady there on the row there. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone this side of the room. No, yep.
Hi, Zara King from the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. So in terms of the data that we do procure in terms of within FCGO, we do a lot of data sets and we procure those. What do you see as the future of government in terms of being a smart cluster between government departments? So actually sharing the services that we already have, sharing the data sets that we already have in terms of doing separate procurements for data sets that we might already have.
Okay, so your question on getting better at sharing data internally to improve procurement and also the procuring of data sets themselves.
Yeah, I am always stunned that government buys the same data set from different sources. I think that's, as a taxpayer, I think that's total madness. I think government find it really hard because of the kind of accounting officer structure to work out which department is going to take the lead on some areas. I think it has done it well in some places, and then that's really powerful. And DIT have driven a lot of that I've seen, and I just think there's more to do on it.
And I mean, I think it's through the centralisation of purchasing and frameworks, there's an opportunity there. To what extent aggregation of spend across different products or different services or different databases exists, I has to guess it's at a fairly early stage. But I mean, that's clearly an area for savings. But whether, again, coming back to the data quality, does government have the data on its vendors and its product categories and its standards of what it's even purchased, let alone then the ability to share that across departmental boundaries? I think there's obviously, we came back to that first question about what's the opportunity? The opportunity is enormous. The mindset and the approach needs to be there for that to be realised.
Thanks. Yes, gentleman down here, this will be the final question. Have we got a mic in this part of the room? Thanks.
Hello, Simon Worthington here. I'd be really interested to hear more about what you think about Contracts Finder. Generally, it should be great, right? Like, it should be a really useful resource, but as you pointed out, the quality is quite low or quite patchy in lots of areas. What interventions do we need to improve the quality of that data and make it useful to suppliers and buyers?
Yeah, I mean, so the report which we just put out just before the summer break on competition, we did try to use Contracts Finder for quite a lot of the analysis. That section of our report was pretty thin, frankly, and because our main finding was its data quality. What does government need to do? Well, it's already in a procurement process to replace Contracts Finder and Finder Tender. So that process is an ambition. It's stated quite boldly in the procurement bill and the supporting government ambitions. So yeah, there's more that needs to be done there. I think open contracting and some of these modern data standards so that it's up to par with the international comparator is the objective. I think I take a global view about these things and have aspirations to be at the top of that list.
Sarah, did you?
Yeah, I think Contract Finder is only holding a limited data set. So there's a lot of procurement going on different frameworks which doesn't make it onto Contract Finder. So even just explaining to people, this is the data which you'll find on Contract Finder, and you should also look in these other sources, I think would be a good step forward. I spoke to a company who wanted to come and supply into UK government. So they're a global company. And they're like, oh, it's great because you can see everything on Contracts Finder. And like, you're not going to see hardly anything of it that you're interested in Contracts Finder. So just explaining what's there and what's not there, I think, is a good first step.
Thank you. I'm just noticing we're flashing red, so we are sadly out of time. But thank you so much. I think what that has left me with is when it comes to kind of procurement and data, huge benefits could be had, some good things happening. But if we look at where we are now, we're kind of on a C-, I think, when it comes to kind of current performance.